And to expand on this, beginning with the August St. Petersburg primary election, we will be conducting 100% audits of all precincts and all contests using a new system called Clear Ballot that you all approved funding for earlier this year. Clear Ballot is separate from the tabulation system. Every ballot that is tabulated, the Clear Ballot system will then separately inventory those ballots and tally those ballots and votes. The Clear Ballot vote totals are then compared to the tabulation system totals to ensure that the security and the accuracy of our ES&S tabulation system is correct. Not only does Clear Ballot audit each contest and each vote cast, it will be able to be used for recounts as soon as the Department of State completes the rulemaking process. And we have the election code, which is 97 through 106, but anywhere within Florida statute where it provides for rulemaking authority, the Department of State has to create those rules, which are an extension of law, in order for us to do that task, which would be the recount. So not only does Clear Ballot audit, anyway, that's Clear Ballot. So we'll be using that in August for audits, and then we have to wait for the recount process. Operating and maintaining the system throughout the year is now a part of our physical and cybersecurity apparatus. Of course, anything involving security and technology requires expertise, which is why we have included in our proposed budget another exempt position in our IT department. Many of us have been together long enough to watch our understanding of cybersecurity evolve and the county's cybersecurity posture mature. And Jeff Roars, I don't see, but Jeff Roars and the folks at BTS deserve a lot of credit. And they really have gone above and beyond by collaborating with our office to secure the vote. We've acquired most of our physical and cybersecurity equipment to do this by using federal and state grant funds. Unfortunately, those funds have run out, and to keep up these systems moving forward, we are now going to have to make them a part of our county budget. Another hit, our federal activities grants that have been issued by the state have run out, and these funds were used for our legally required advertisements, for poll worker training, and now also have to be a part of our county budget. And after all of this, and our fall elections, the legislature will be meeting again, conducting redistricting, as this board will, and the school board. And once we receive district lines, we will begin redrawing precinct lines. So it is the legislative bodies of the state, the county, and school board to redraw districts because of reapportionment. But then our responsibility is then to create these political jurisdictions called precincts. And then we have to renumber them. And then we have to get them approved by the Board of County Commission, this board. And we need to do all of this and then mail voter info cards before we mail ballots to voters for the August primary of 2022. We, of course, will work with Jewel and county admin to make sure that you have all the information that you need timely. And we will also be working with you all to make sure we get on the board's agendas appropriately so that we can meet all the legal requirements. I am going to do everything I can to make sure that we maintain the continuity of our precincts and our polling places everywhere we can. Why is that important? Because familiarity is essential to the electoral process. Voters who are familiar with the process are going to be more confident in that process. And voters who are more confident in a process are more likely to participate in that process. And that is my goal every single day. I also want to maintain that very delicate balance between access and integrity. So we have to be very deliberate and thoughtful in everything that we do. After every election, after every legislative session, we reevaluate our processes and our procedures. We look at data, we look at trends, we look at new requirements, and then we make evidence-based decisions that are responsive to our electorate. If you were watching the clocks on election night, you would have seen that 82% of election results in Pinellas were released by 7:05 p.m., with 100% reporting by 8:15 p.m. We have seen an increase in the number of voters voting prior to Election Day, reaching record numbers in 2020. With our continued efforts to ensure voters are educated about their voting options, we expect this trend to continue. For Pinellas voters, mail ballots have been the preferred method for casting ballots. Mail ballots are convenient, they are secure, and they are reasonable. Right now, more than 367,000 people, voters, or 52% of our registered voters, have a mail ballot request on file. And to continue to meet the needs of these mail ballot voters, our budget has to include return postage and the costs associated with maintaining 25 mail ballot drop-off locations that are throughout the county. We have also followed in-person early voting trends, and what we saw in 2020 was a significant increase in the number of voters voting early. There is a point of diminishing returns on the number of early voting sites. However, the data supports adding 2 more sites to meet the needs of those voters choosing to vote early. It is very important to note that just because you add a site or you move an early voting site does not mean you are making it easier or faster for voters to vote. For example, if you have a small facility that does not accommodate a large group of people, all you're doing is creating lines and wait times. So there is a lot of considerations that go into the number of sites and where those sites need to be located. For now, we are considering the new locations to be in the countryside area and in the Tyrone-Lellman area. We are also considering relocating the early voting site that we had in 2020 at the Allstate Center to another location nearby. The list of considerations that we use to evaluate each of these spaces is extensive. For example, you have to take into consideration what the law requires for an early voting site. We have to make sure that they are equally accessible to all voters in the county. We have to consider things like mass transit. We have to consider ingress and egress, and that's with does it make sense the way that cars are pulling in and traffic parking and the way that cars are going out? Does it make sense where voters are coming in and voting, and are they easily able to get back out? Then you have ballot drop-off locations that have to be at those locations. So there's a lot that goes into it. But going into 2022, 91% of all of the voters in Pinellas County will be within 5 miles of an early voting site, coupled with all voters being within 3 miles of a ballot drop-off location. Early voting, of course, has infrastructure costs. For example, we will have to buy ballot-on-demand printers and electronic poll books. And this budget's going to allow for us to purchase that equipment that we need to stand up these additional sites. Knowing that the majority of the election is actually happening prior to Election Day, we need to add 3 more classified positions to our voter services department. It's just one of these things where we have the responsibilities are to such a degree that we have to have people on staff that know what they're doing. Elections are very complex, and we have to have people with institutional knowledge. You can't just throw somebody in the middle of an election and be like, good luck. So I've told every new employee who comes on board that your learning curve is solid 4 years. Because a municipal election is not a gubernatorial election, and a presidential is in its own league. So to that end, I have an incredible staff, and it really is difficult to put into words what these folks do and the sacrifices that they make to make sure that our elections are conducted fairly, accurately, and securely. And I would be remiss if I did not give a shout out to the hundreds of additional county employees who helped us during the 2020 election cycle. Ken Burke, the clerk of the circuit court and comptroller, provided us with 50 employees who from July through the end of November helped us with everything from call center operations, from scanning and indexing, to mailing out ballots, to helping us process ballots. It goes on and on. Barry, Jill Silverboard, thank you. Your department heads, what you were able to do to help us get hundreds of county employees to be poll workers for every election during a pandemic, I really thank you. And Jewel White and your staff, who help us in so many ways. I mean, litigation, that's a given, legal counsel, but then our litany of questions to make sure we get it right. Because in elections, as if you're a canvassing board, as you know, there are no mulligans in elections. It has to be done right. You get one chance. And Jewel, you help you help us in so many ways. And you help us with the canvassing board, of course, and make sure that we all stay on track. And that's hours and hours of support, day in and day out. So thank you. I am truly blessed to be a part of an amazing group of civil and public servants. Pinellas is one of those large counties, but has that heart of a small town USA. We care about each other and we help each other. And in closing, I want to thank you for your time and your continued support. And of course, I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, well, that was awesome. Thank you for that information. Thank you for your passion for what you do. And thank you for Pinellas County really being a leader, not only in the state of Florida, but throughout the country, and what we provide our residents in terms of access and integrity. So great work. Questions? Commissioner Flowers.
Good morning. Good to see you. Julie started at the SOE office when I first started my career, I guess, in elected office. So we've kind of grown up in this together.
Yeah.
I think you're doing a really good job, and you know how I feel about you and your team. When I walk in the door, everybody knows my name. That's not to say they don't know everybody else's name, but it's just like a little family over there. I'm glad to hear you talk about being very deliberate regarding the way that you will look at precincts, because you already know how many people may be confused as it relates to what precinct they have to go to vote in. And so I really appreciate that. And more so because we have over 800 units being built right now between 38th Avenue South and 34th Street and about 22nd Avenue South. And so I participated in an event where we tried to drive people for the Allstate Center to make sure that they knew that place was present and that it was available. We had an activity. Thank you so much for partnering with us, and it was wonderful. I know you said you're going to look at moving that somewhere else. I just want you to maybe consider keeping it within that close proximity, because with over 800 units being built, they will be completed soon. Those persons are new added voters, to the area, and it's within walking distance from the housing complexes down 38th Avenue South. So it's a wonderful location, and I just wanted to thank you all for adding that Allstate location and be considering to keep it in that area. For your mail ballot requests. What all happened with the changes in legislation. But I think we're going to see that increase, mail ballot requests. And so is there any additional communication or marketing that may be done related to signature verification? Because we do have some seniors or persons who are ill, their signature may change because maybe they weren't on medication before, but they're on medication now, so the signature isn't the same. Maybe they didn't know they should go in. That's not on the top priority list, unfortunately, to go in and maybe redo their signature. So do you have any plans for maybe just going forward to try to really get that information out so that mail ballot signatures will match what you have on file?
Yes. So we approach every year, no less election cycle, with an education program that is very comprehensive. So we take a layered approach to each way that a voter may want to participate in elections, starting with mail ballots, for example. How do you request a mail ballot? How do you make sure that you keep your information up to date with us, whether that is, as you said, a signature, address, name, what have you, because anytime that you have a delay because an address wasn't updated, we can't get that ballot, because ballots, there's a lot of information out there that is not necessarily accurate. For example, we don't just mail ballots to everyone. We never have. That has never been something in the state of Florida that has ever happened, ever. And you have to request a mail ballot. And if you don't keep your address current with us, then your ballot's not forwardable. It has to come back to us. So it's important for us to make sure that voters are educated on that. Same with signatures. Anytime that we find that signatures have reached a certain time, we send a letter to get an updated signature. Anytime a signature goes before a canvassing board, whether it's accepted or rejected, but we follow up with those voters. There's also a cure process. So mail ballots, making sure that you return them timely. It was a great community effort. Whether it was our office, the media, campaigns, candidates, what have you, last year in 2020, where voters were being educated on the process, which is, of course, helpful, because anytime that we get folks to spread the word accurately about what the law is, we saw ballots coming in on time, voters were signing, but I think voters were taking a level of personal ownership to a degree that we've never seen before, in the sense that they think they really wanted to be engaged and involved. And then same with early voting, making sure you bring the type of ID you need, you know where you're going, that you know the times that it closes on Sundays. We will maintain the Sunday before, that it's return postage. We also are maintaining our 25 ballot drop-off locations, and those locations have always been staffed in Pinellas County. Pinellas County has served, I would say, is the model for how ballot drop-off locations should be used. We've always had chain of custody procedures. We have always had reconciliation and auditing procedures. They have always been staffed. A mail ballot has never been kept overnight at any location. They have always been required to be brought back. So these are things that Pinellas County has been doing since, we've been doing this since 2008, which is long before other counties were doing them just as recently as last year. So I feel very confident in our procedures and moving forward. And as far as the voters concerned, our goal is to ensure that it doesn't matter what we had to do to get ready for the election. I want every voter to have a positive voting experience, and that they hit that was easy button, so that they come back and they vote again. So it doesn't matter what we have to do to get ready. I want to make sure the voters see it as something that was seamless, and that they'll come back and vote. And then Election Day, to speak on Election Day, again, back in 2012 when we did redistricting then, it was also our goal. I think it was over 80% of our polling places never changed, and same with the precincts themselves. I mean, keep in mind, to an extent, there's some things we're going to have to. I mean, if district lines change, a precinct is a political jurisdiction where it has the same congressional, same House, same Senate, same BCC, same school board. So you have all those layers, and then you have to start breaking up the county into precincts. So we're going to do everything we can, maintain. We had 166 polling places in the 2020 general. I recognize that those community-based polling places are instrumental to the process, because not everybody wants to vote by mail. That's fine. Not everybody can get to an early voting location. Great. But they can walk to their polling place. So I think that having a layered approach to an election is prudent.
Thank you. And my last question is, since August isn't that far away, will you be doing some type of communication related to masks coming in or not? Because, you know, we know that what's been stated statewide, but you still will have some people who are apprehensive. And I don't want to talk anything into negative existence, but unfortunately we've read cases of where persons have, they've been asked to put a mask on and they've not, and it has caused some issues. So are you going to do anything just to kind of get that information out so that persons will know what their options are, so that people feel safe no matter which side you're on as it relates to wearing a mask or not?
Our approach in 2020 will be no different going into this election cycle or 2022. We'll follow CDC guidelines. Voters can choose the way that they would like to participate in the election. So we'll have masks available if a voter forgot and they choose to do that. But that would not be a requirement to vote, and it was not in 2020.
Yeah, just before you leave the comment, could you just talk about the cure process for signature a little bit? Because a couple of years ago, state made a change so that if we get a ballot early in the process that there's not a match, then we not only would we want to, but we also are required to go back. So maybe talk just briefly about that curing process, because it's important.
Yeah. This is one of these I embrace legislative changes. So this was a wonderful opportunity given to our voters who may have just simply made a mistake. So you have two categories mainly that are in this cure environment. One is you forgot to sign it, and the other is that there's a signature variation. So what happens is when a ballot is returned, it goes through our Blue Crest mailing system. On the back end, it's called a sorter. It goes, all those ballots get put through there. They're then identified as returned. Therefore, a voter couldn't return a second ballot. They couldn't show up at the polls on early voting or on election day and try to vote, because it would show that they already voted. But this system also takes a picture of the envelope where the voter signed. So what happens is those ballots can then go into a ballot locker, and then we can verify signatures using computer monitors. So I've got a picture of your signature that's in the file, and now I have an image of what was returned on the return envelope, and I can compare. Any signature that may not be, that's a lot off, okay? So we're not talking, so I signed my name Julie with a K, Marcus. If I signed it Julie Marcus and left out the K, if you see the similarities between the J and the M and so on and so forth, that's a comparable signature. We're talking, I signed my name in the file, but I wrote out not cursive, and that's a signature differ. No, that's not the same. And so what happens, that would then get kicked out, and we are required by law, which I think is great, to send that voter a letter with return postage envelope with instructions on how to cure that, which is an affidavit. They have to include a form of a copy of a form of ID. And if they send that back to us, we also make phone calls. We text if we can. We email if we can. Again, that's just based on what the voter provides to us as part of their file. And if they cure it, we count it. And then any ballots that maybe were half cured, and what I mean by this is a voter included the affidavit, but they didn't include the required copy of a type of ID, or they didn't return anything, then those go back down to the canvassing board, because only the canvassing board can reject a mail ballot. And none of those that are in the cure process can be considered for rejection until 5 p.m. the Thursday following the election. So because it's basically due process. It's allowing for that voter to go through a process before their ballot could potentially be rejected. But it is a great law, and we're talking, there's sometimes 40 to 50% of the ballots that end up in this category end up getting cured, where maybe 5-6 years ago, I think it was, would have been rejected otherwise. So that is a great law.
Yeah. Thank you, Julie. Commissioner Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Thank you for being here. And before I get my questions, just want to thank you for representing Pinellas well in your advocacy and your communication with the state when they do these proposed changes and when the meeting that was the other day in Tampa. Anyway, just want to thank you for advocating for the voters of Pinellas. I appreciate that. Did I hear you say that you were going to put an early voting site in Tyrone?
Yeah, so we're considering the Tyrone-Lellman area, so somewhere in that area. We have a couple sites in mind, but yes. But I would like to note that we are moving your polling place to Tampa.
Well, I was going to say that you must have lost, or your predecessor's executive memo about no voting sites in Tyrone must have gotten lost or expired somewhere along the way for that to happen.
No, it's more in we're looking at between 22nd Avenue North and Lellman, which is like 54. It's a location in between there.
Okay.
Again, the building has to make sense. So somebody may say, well, why didn't you just drop it in the middle of this community? Well, it may not have made sense for the reasons that I gave during the presentation. And believe it or not, ingress and egress, how cars move in and out, and traffic, and somebody once said, why don't you use the clerk of the circuit courts building on US 19? I'm like, because how are you going to get in and out of that building? I'm like, US 19, and there's no turn, there isn't a light. So there's just things that we need to think of, because the last thing we want our voters to do is show up at an early voting site, which, by the way, the statute leads with, for the convenience of the voters. So we want to maintain that early voting is a convenience and not make folks stand in line for no reason.
And then we have 301 precincts, correct?
Yes.
So before the pandemic, how many actual polling sites did we have on Election Day? And then how many did we have with the cutback last year with all the situation there? And then how many do you anticipate having for this fall in 2022?
So we lost between the PPP, the March election of 2020, and the August primary. I think it was 12. A lot of those were assisted living facilities or facilities where it was 55 plus communities, which makes sense. But because we didn't want there to be an issue moving forward, we just chose not to stay at those locations. So in the 2020 general, we had 166, and again, going into redistricting, our goal is to stay as close to that number as possible.
Okay, I would just, as you're looking at them, and I know we joke a lot about my precinct, but in reality, my precinct, from when I moved into my house, which was 6 blocks from my house, to where it was 12 blocks from my house, to where now it's 2.9 miles, and by Google, it's over an hour walk. So I know we have a lot of fun joking about it, but I want us to be cognizant that those are real issues that folks face that don't have the luxury or may not want to do by mail, may not want to do early voting, but still want, as long as we have it available in law, want that voting day experience, which I do. I love that. I love going on Election Day, but it's getting to be more of a thing, and I want us to be cognizant every step of the process. As much fun as we have with it, I want us to take it a little seriously too.
I take it very seriously, and I feel very strongly that after our 2020 general election, where we had 79% highest voter turnout in decades, also highest voter turnout than the 5 largest counties in the state, us being the 6th, I feel that our voters did not experience wait times. I mean, these are statistics. They had positive voting experience in unprecedented circumstances. So I feel, and I know that we joke around, but I feel that our voters have the opportunity to cast a ballot, whether they choose by mail, early voting, or on Election Day, and that we provide the best customer service that we can to ensure that our voters are treated fairly and that they can cast a ballot and feel that their voices were heard and that their votes were counted accurately and securely.
Very good.
Okay, Commissioner Gerard.
Just a couple of questions. Thanks for being here. I'm really glad to hear you're adding the early voting sites. That's excellent. Mail ballot requests. Are we going to have to do that for every election now? But does our little checkbox that we do,
Yeah.
that serves as a request for the next one, right?
Yeah, so
Or do we know that yet?
well, yeah, so okay, so the law that it has changed. So now it's, instead of the end of the calendar year of the second general election, it'll be the end of the calendar year of one general election cycle. So yes, requests will come off and voters will have to put those back on. Our goal is to make that process seamless for the voters. Unfortunately, from the way that it looks, after speaking with council, we are not going to be able to use that checkbox anymore because of the information that is now going to be required. But we will have a way that voters are going to be able to request mail ballots and be able to participate in the election if they choose to vote by mail.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is that I don't want to create a process where it's going to feel that voters have to go through a maze or that they have to follow, all these different steps and procedures that's complicated and trying to figure out how do I navigate this very complex process. No, we are going to craft a way that voters are it's going to be right there. It's going to be like, oh, this is now how I have to do it, and be able to get that request back in that makes sense and that also is cost effective. And I think that we can do that. I feel very positive that we're going to be able to we have a way that we're going to be able to do that.
Okay. And after redistricting, you'll have to, will people have to request or register? I mean, if their precinct changes, will you just send them a voting ID card, or if it changes, but you don't have to send it to everyone?
So for redistricting, we will have to send a voter information card.
Right.
I just want to say that because it's important. This changed many, many years ago. You cannot use this voter info card as a form of identification to be used at the polls. Basically, it's for informational purposes. It's to tell you what your precinct number is, where your polling place is, and then the districts in which you're eligible to vote in. And every voter in 2022 is going to have to be mailed one of these voter info cards, regardless of if their precinct or polling place changes, because the districts will have changed. So we'll have to update that across the bottom of the card.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Just so you know, Commissioners, the 4 positions that Julie talked about, those are within her budget target that she was provided by OMB, so she met that within her budget. And then there's also one decision package that's for scanning of historical voter registration applications that we'll consider as part of the budget. She says that's boring, but anytime you're talking money, it's not boring. So.
No, but if I may, since it was brought up, just to quickly explain it, when it comes to voter registration applications pursuant to the public records law and retention law, they have to be kept forever. And we have voter registration applications that are in boxes up on the second floor that if we do not scan and index these documents, we will lose the integrity of those documents. And to make sure that we're in compliance with statute, we have put in the budget for us to be able to work with the clerk of the circuit court, whose staff would then index and scan them first, then and preserved and maintained so that we can meet the requirements under the statutes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Long.
I wasn't going to say, excuse me, I wasn't going to say anything, Julie, but your attention to detail and your way in which you have been so articulate this morning in explaining the massive amount of detail involved with putting on an election is remarkable. And I could not applaud you more for how you have filled very big shoes that you were left and really pulled that off in a stellar, professional, incredibly nonpartisan way, which in the world we live in today is remarkable all on its own. So I just wanted to share my heartfelt thanks for that as it relates to you. And also, I ask this question of the supervisor elections every single year because the first time I ever saw it, it so touched me that I want to make sure it continues for our students. And so I'd like to know if you're still delivering that magnificent little video about the dog tags and the importance of voting.
Well, you're going to start making me cry.
I can't help it. It chokes me up every single time I think about it.
Yeah, so we actually, we created the Vote in Honor of a Vet program, which received national recognition.
As it should have.
And, you know, I come from a military family. My father served, my sister, and now my nephew is in the Air Force serving overseas. And not that this is this is a pretty good base, but he's in Italy, so good for him.
Good
so
for
he
him.
made it to Italy. He was quarantined forever while he was over there, but it took. But I'm very proud of him. I'm very proud of my family's service. But I think it's really important that we continue to know the sacrifices that men and women have made since the beginning, since we declared our independence. And it's not just limb, it's life. I mean, it's life. People died for what we have, and I think it's really important that we don't just do our Vote in Honor of a Vet program in our high schools. We start in the elementary schools. I believe that civics is important. I believe that what we have here in this country is I mean, there are people who die to try to go and vote today. And we are very blessed. And I think that it's very important that we go into elementary schools, middle schools, or high schools, or colleges, so that we conduct mock elections, which kids love because they get to vote on their class presidents, but they also get to vote on like what their favorite ice cream is. So it's just showing that from a young age that by the time they turn 18, it's like, oh, I know what this is, and they go and do it. It's familiar. It's something that they're used to seeing and doing. And I don't want it to be something that when they turn 18 that it seems so. That they don't know what it is. So therefore, if I don't know what it is, I'm not going to do it. So I'm really proud of our voter outreach program. And yes, that the students recognize that my veteran, because that's the base of the program, is you're voting in honor of a veteran. And you get a veteran biography. And so then it makes it personal that I'm turning out to vote because of this veteran sacrifice. You get a dog tag that basically you promise to vote in honor of your veteran. And yes, that program will continue.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for asking about that and sharing that story. I think that's just a great program. Awesome. So, thank you.
Well, the reason it was so meaningful to me, because at the same time that I saw that, both of my sons were serving in combat.
Yes,
so
ma'am. I know. I remember and thank you, because I can't even fathom what that must be like for mothers and dads and husbands and wives and kids.
But the most remarkable thing was watching the enthusiasm from the students when they got to elect in real life, at a polling station, their class presidents and their officers for each of the classes. It was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just found it, I don't know, just very patriotic. So
Yes.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
And whoever came up with that was a genius. But I think in the world, did you?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you, Dustin, because you know what? In the world we live in, as divisive as everything is, I think you should be showing that in the Congress, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It could make a huge difference.
Yeah, I would like to think that that our common thread is we're all Americans and we do have a great love for our country. And let's get out and vote. Let's do our part. I think it's really, obviously, our whole staff, every one of us believes in what we do. You bleed red, white, and blue. You have to. People say, why do you do this? And I'm like, because the room next door is padded, so I have a pad, but that all joking aside. But no, you really have to love what you do. Folks who come on board, they're either there for a very short period of time or they're lifers. And we have a lot of people who have been doing this for
Well, it's
for a very
lovely
long
to see
time,
Dustin
so-
here today. I hardly recognize
if I can,
him in
I'd
his
like-
suit with his
yes, if-
glasses.
he looks very distinguished
He
today.
sure
yes?
does.
So that's Dustin Chase. Dustin Chase is my Deputy Supervisor of Elections / Communications Director. My Chief Deputy, Mark Gillette, is in Orlando in a voter focus, our voter registration database is, our vendor that we use is VR, and they're having a roundtable, so we kind of had to split responsibilities. So him and staff that are involved in making sure that our processes work properly are over there at a roundtable, and Dustin had the luxury of making sure that this went well. No, I'm just kidding.
Good job, Dustin.
Any other questions for Julie? Okay. Julie, thank you.
Thank you all
Yeah,
very much
great.
for your time. Appreciate it.